when one is constructing a building, it is essential that there first be a good solid foundation. Joanna and I were watching one of our favorite house shows yesterday, Leave It to Brian. And Brian Balmer, the expert house builder, goes into people's situations. They give him choices of renovation, and then he picks the project he thinks is the most important. Well, the one he picked happened to be the backyard garage, and it showed Brian going up to this structure that was on a really terrible foundation, didn't have a proper foundation, and the building itself, Brian pushed it over. He just knocked it over. And when the couple came back and saw that it was the garage that was down, they were shocked, and he said, they said, "How'd you get it down?" He said, "I huffed and I puffed and I blew the house down." It was funny. But the first thing they did when they were going to build the new garage for the couple, which turned out really nice, but they did a beautiful concrete foundation for that house. And so a solid foundation for a building is absolutely essential. When buildings were made out of stone, they often had one cornerstone, or stone from which the rest of the foundation kind of stemmed, and that was the important stone that they would begin the construction with. The cornerstone was essential for the stability of the whole structure. Back when stones were hand-hewn, the masons would first carefully select a cornerstone. And it had to be flawless. It had to have no cracks in it, no fault lines, no weak spots, so that they could then, once they laid the cornerstone, they could build the rest of the foundation from that cornerstone. And then the mason would carefully select stone after stone and place the stones in the structure where it best fit. And they would have to fit them because, of course, every stone is different. There's no two stones that are alike. And it's not like our man-made bricks that are just exactly, same size, shape. You can grab any brick and put it in. The stones are unique, and so they had to fit them in so that they all fit in together. And it took a good master builder to do that, a good mason who could then put those stones in after carefully looking at each one into the best place for it to be. I call my husband the master packer, and in the sense of packing up a vehicle. If you're taking the car for a big trip, like when we go to the cottage, he can fit all our suitcases, our food, all our stuff, and get it all in there, and get the trunk lid closed. It's amazing to me that it all fits in there. And there's even situations, because he knows me, we'll be halfway on the trip or a quarter of the way on the trip, and I'm like, "I'm cold, I want my sweater." "No problem, pull in the thing." You could just flip it open, he's got my suitcase on the top, unzips and zips, here's your sweater, feeling your shirt. Wow, I know that if I was in charge of doing that job, which I really don't have the skill for, I'd get everything in there and close the trunk, and there'd be 4 or 5 things still sitting outside with no more space for it. But it takes a master builder to build a structure and to fit it in so that the whole structure is sound, without any gaps, without any holes there. And the better the skill of the master builder, the more solid and lasting the structure will be. Peter uses this image of the church as a structure made out of stones. He actually gives you a real visual picture of that. He says, as you come to him, meaning Jesus, who is the living stone, rejected by men but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house. So he has the picture of Christ as the living stone, or the cornerstone, and the rest, all of us as living stones, each of us unique, but all being built into the structure of the church. He said you're being built into a spiritual house. So Jesus then is the foundation. And it's interesting that he very specifically, he doesn't just say stone, he says living stone. So he's not a dead, inert stone. Don't know if you've noticed it lately. Stones don't have a whole lot of life in them. You know, they sit there. But Jesus is the living stone. Jesus is the one who was precious, Peter says. He was rejected by men. So he's the cornerstone that was rejected. We know that the people of Israel and the Romans rejected Christ. He is the Creator and the Lord, and yet he was not received by those that he created, by humankind. And so it really symbolizes the fact that as human beings, our bent is to build our own lives, to be our own masons, and call the shots and decide what our life structure will be. But there is a problem with that. If we are going to be in charge of building our own lives, we'll end up with something that isn't going to hold together. It's not going to be lasting. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be the little garage. Someone built that didn't know how to build, that Brian just pushed over. And so God says that unless the Lord builds a house, all who build it labor in vain. And Peter is telling us to build your house solid. Start with the living stone. Start with Christ, the cornerstone, that God has selected. People rejected him, but God, the master builder, chose him as the best foundation for our lives. Jesus, the person of Jesus. And when God builds a structure, it will be lasting, it will be solid, it will be stable. And the cornerstone that God has chosen is perfect because it's flawless. Jesus was perfectly obedient before God, and he's flawless. So God has not chosen a system for the cornerstone of the church. He hasn't chosen a type of organization. He hasn't chosen just a physical type of building. If you build this kind of building, you'll have the church. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. If you follow these regulations, you'll have the church. He hasn't created a membership list. If you join and sign this membership list on a piece of paper, you have the church. No, he says, if you build your lives on Christ, that's the foundation for the church. Jesus is the tried and precious and chosen stone. He gave his life for us, and then that living stone, as we rely on him and trust in him, imparts his life to us so we become the living stones. And now we're living stones. We're responsive to the Lord. We can hear his guidance. We can be led by Jesus. He's the foundation, and we're the stones. So we're living stones. We're not just plonked, and there you are. We are, it's a wonderful image to think of the church as built with living stones. And God is the one who fits those stones in where they best fit. He sets them into the body. Paul tells us that God has set each one of us into the body. Peter says that this stone, in order to be the cornerstone, all you do is believe that he is the Christ, that he is raised from the dead. And those who believe it, Jesus becomes their cornerstone. Those who don't, Jesus becomes then the stumbling stone for them. So the stone kind of has two ways of affecting people's lives. Those who receive Jesus, the cornerstone, they become part of that structure. But those that don't, those that are ashamed, those that don't understand the message, those who won't believe that he died, he bore sins upon the cross, that he invites us into forgiveness and into God's mercy, those that don't believe,